Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a story of betrayal, resilience, and a meticulously planned fight for justice. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any part of this incredible journey. All right, I understand. You need the first 5 segments of the story significantly expanded to provide more detail, depth, and emotional resonance, making them suitable for a longer video format. I'll focus on richer descriptions, deeper insights into Alex's thoughts and feelings, and more vivid portrayals of the events and Mr. Peterson's character transformation. Here are the expanded first 5 segments of the story. The first year I spent living in the apartment on Elm Street was a period I now look back on with a bittersweet fondness, almost as if it were a dream. It wasn't just an apartment, it was my haven, a carefully curated sanctuary carved out of the bustling city. Sunlight, the kind that feels like liquid gold, would pour through the large bay window in the living room every morning, illuminating the worn but beloved armchair where I'd sip my coffee and read. The walls were adorned with art I'd collected over years, each piece a story, a memory. From my small balcony, I had a view of a tiny, meticulously kept community garden, a splash of vibrant green against the urban grays. The neighborhood itself was a charming tapestry of old trees, independent bookstores, and the distant, comforting rumble of the city. But the true cornerstone of this idyllic existence, or so I believed, was my landlord, Mr. Peterson. He was a man who seemed to belong to a kinder, gentler era. In his late 60s, with a warm, crinkled smile and a genuine twinkle in his eyes, he wasn't just a building owner. He was a presence, a benevolent custodian. I remember the day I moved in, struggling with a heavy bookcase. He appeared as if from nowhere, rolled up his sleeves, and not only helped me carry it up 2 flights of stairs, but also produced a small toolkit from his pocket to help me tighten a loose leg, all while sharing amusing anecdotes about the building's history. On another occasion, when my ancient refrigerator finally gave up the ghost on a sweltering July weekend, he didn't just promise a replacement, he arrived within hours with a loaner mini-fridge from his own home and had a brand new one installed by Monday morning. He'd often leave a small bag of tomatoes or zucchini from his own garden by my door in the summer, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. He was, I thought, the epitome of a good man, a fair landlord, the kind you read about but rarely encounter. This profound sense of security, of having found a stable, peaceful home managed by someone so genuinely considerate, allowed me to flourish in other areas of my life, to focus on my demanding career, and to simply breathe, knowing that my small corner of the world was safe. The transition was so subtle, so insidious, that for a long time I didn't even consciously register it as a change in Mr. Peterson himself. It was more like a faint, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere, like the air pressure dropping slightly before a storm you don't yet see on the horizon. The first instance I can clearly recall was a comment about my footsteps. I was working late on a project, and around 10 p.m., as I walked from my desk to the kitchen to make tea, I heard a sharp rap on my door the next morning. It was Mr. Peterson, his usual smile just a little strained. "Alex," he began, his voice softer than usual. "Some of the other tenants, well, someone, mentioned hearing rather heavy footsteps from your apartment late last night. Sounded like pacing, apparently." I was taken aback. I'm a naturally quiet person, and I was merely walking, not pacing. I explained, a little flustered, that I was just moving about normally. He nodded, said, well, these old buildings, sound travels, and left it at that. But the seed of self-consciousness was planted. A week or so later, another gentle comment, this time about the aroma of my cooking. I often made a fragrant curry on Friday nights, something I'd done since I moved in. "A bit exotic for the building, perhaps," he'd mused, encountering me in the hallway, his nose wrinkling slightly. "Some of the older residents have, well, Again, it was phrased as a concern for others, not a direct complaint, but it made me hesitate before cooking my favorite dish the following week. These were not accusations, not yet, but rather carefully worded observations that had the effect of making me question my own normal everyday activities. I initially dismissed them. Perhaps he was just having an off day, or maybe there genuinely was a new overly sensitive neighbor. The thought that Mr. Peterson himself, the kind, helpful man I knew, was intentionally trying to make me uncomfortable didn't even enter my mind at that stage. The gentle hints and subtle suggestions, however, soon began to morph into a pattern of more direct, frequent, and undeniably unreasonable demands. The carefully constructed facade of the kindly landlord was beginning to crack, revealing something harder and less accommodating underneath. The issue of guests, for instance, escalated dramatically. One Saturday, my sister came over for brunch. We were laughing, catching up, certainly. The hours immediately following the discovery of that stark white envelope were a blur of disbelief and a suffocating, cloying despair. Sleep became an elusive tormentor. The nights were endless stretches of staring at the ceiling. The fabricated accusations on the eviction notice replaying in my mind like a broken record. Each repetition a fresh stab of injustice. I'd reread the document countless times, my hands shaking, searching for some loophole, some mistake, some sign that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But the cold, legalistic jargon, the carefully listed falsehoods, offered no such solace. It was a declaration of war, and I felt utterly defenseless. The image of Mr. Peterson, the once kindly landlord, morphed into something sinister, a calculating puppeteer who had played me for a fool. There were moments I considered just giving in. The thought of packing up my life, of finding a new place under such duress, was overwhelming. But perhaps it was easier than fighting an unknown battle. The city felt vast and indifferent, and I, a small, insignificant tenant, felt utterly alone. Then, slowly, through the cracks of that despair, something else began to seep in. It was a flicker at first, a tiny ember of indignation. How dare he? How dare he try to uproot my life based on such blatant lies, all for the sake of a few extra dollars on the rent? The memory of his feigned concern, his earlier helpful gestures, now felt like calculated manipulations, a performance designed to lull me into a false sense of security. The sheer audacity of his scheme, the contemptuous disregard for my rights and my humanity, began to curdle the despair into a potent, simmering anger. It wasn't just about the apartment anymore. It was about the principle. This was wrong, unequivocally wrong, and the thought of letting him get away with it, of simply vanishing into the night as he clearly intended, began to feel like a betrayal of myself. That ember of indignation caught, and a fierce, defiant resolve began to burn away the suffocating fog of helplessness. I would not be a footnote in his profitable scheme. I would not be a victim. With this newfound, albeit fragile, resolve, my cramped living room transformed into a makeshift legal research hub. Fueled by endless cups of rapidly cooling coffee and a burning sense of purpose, I plunged into the labyrinthine world of tenant rights. The glow of my laptop screen became a familiar companion deep into the early hours of the morning, my fingers flying across the keyboard, chasing down statutes, legal precedents, and advice forums. Initially, the sheer volume of information was overwhelming, a dense forest of legal jargon and complex clauses. But I persisted, driven by a desperate need to understand, to find a weapon in this unfair fight. I meticulously bookmarked websites for local housing authorities, downloaded tenant handbooks, and scoured forums where others shared their own harrowing experiences with unscrupulous landlords. Slowly, painstakingly, patterns began to emerge. I learned about the strict legal requirements for serving eviction notices, the specific just cause reasons that were permissible in my jurisdiction, none of which remotely matched the fabricated nonsense on Mr. Peterson's letter.
I discovered the concept of retaliatory eviction, and a jolt went through me as I realized his actions, following my polite but firm pushback on his earlier unreasonable demands, might fit that very definition. I read about the implied covenant of quiet enjoyment that every landlord owed their tenant, a covenant Mr. Peterson had systematically violated with his campaign of harassment. Each relevant piece of information felt like finding a piece of a shield, a section of a sword. There were moments of pure, unadulterated revelation, aha moments that cut through the exhaustion, as I realized that his carefully worded notice was in fact legally deficient in several key aspects. The law, which I had initially feared as an unassailable fortress protecting property owners, began to reveal itself as a potential ally, a set of rules that even Mr. Peterson, in his arrogance, could not simply ignore. This knowledge didn't just empower me, it armed me. The accumulation of legal knowledge was a powerful catalyst, but the decision to truly fight, to actively engage in a legal battle rather than just using my understanding to negotiate a better exit, was a separate, more profound internal reckoning. For days, I oscillated. One moment, I'd be filled with a righteous fire,